Hey everybody, Greg from the Player Engaged podcast, and here's what you're about to listen to. We are going to be focusing on cheating today. What is cheating? Did you know that cheating is actually a business? I learned that on this podcast today. It has a huge impact on gaming and communities. What is the Intorqa approach to anti-cheat? And what is the real cost of cheating? We're going to be visited by Andrew Hogan from Intorqa, and he's the co-founder and CRO, and it's a really cool podcast where we learn a lot. So I really hope you enjoy this episode. Let us know what you think. Enjoy. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Player Engage podcast. Greg here. Today, we are joined by Andrew Hogan, the CRO and co-founder of Intorqa. Andrew has been around being a brand strategist at Barclays. He has a lot of brand strategy in his background, and has a lot of brand director and kind of creative background. So I'm excited to be able to pick on him to understand the creative background and how he goes from banking to gaming and anti-cheat. And I'm excited to learn about that. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks for having me. I'm Andrew. I'm the currently the Chief Revenue Officer and one of the co-founders of Intorqa. And yeah, it's quite an interesting journey. From my background was in advertising, on the agency side, and then on the client side in marketing teams, including, as you mentioned, Barclays, which is probably was my most recent job before starting Intorqa. And one of the things that it came out of, actually, it was one of the things we were doing at Barclays was looking at gaming from a brand perspective, but also a commercial perspective, actually, because we were on the payment side. And obviously, there's with micro payments going on in gaming, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We were getting interested. So I started a project to look at how we could get involved in gaming. It so happened that before, it's actually since I've left Barclays, they have continued, actually, and they are on the UK side of things very much involved in gaming. But I left Barclays towards the end of 2019, and I've been having conversations with actually an old friend of mine, but also someone who was involved in media monitoring, and he and I started sort of chatting about what he was up to. And so when I left Barclays, we carried on talking. And one of the things that I noticed with gaming when I was at Barclays was that there are some issues around cheating, for example, and also toxicity and fraud. And obviously, with sort of our financial heads on, we were kind of we dug a little deeper into this. So I'd seen that whilst gaming was absolutely huge, there was this problem around cheating. And Martin and I, the CEO of Intorqa, were talking, and we sort of jumped on the idea that by using social listening techniques, threat intelligence techniques, we could help publishers deal with the threat of cheating and get ahead of the bad actors. And so I came on board Intorqa, and there's, along with the sort of with Martin, the CEO, and also Michael Williams, the COO. And that was 4 years ago. We launched Intorqa right in the middle of right at the sort of start, actually, of COVID, March 2020. And here we are today, still surviving.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's fascinating. I didn't really put it together at first until you started talking about at Barclays, it's a bank. People are paying with their cards. So there's a gamification, maybe not gamification, but there's a game side to it that's dealing with that stuff. And for our listeners, we originally met Andrew through our community clubhouse. It's not our community clubhouse, through community clubhouse, where they are a sponsor of it. And when he started telling me about what they do, it was mind boggling, because you don't understand how people are looking at different ways people do cheat. People cheat in all different types of games, whether it's free to play, mobile, console, and there's different approaches that people take to it. And when you go to the Intorqa website, it goes through some of these as well, on how people cheat these free to play games. And it's fascinating to hear. And I guess from a high level, can you give us a little elevator pitch on what exactly Intorqa is doing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, cheating in gaming is nothing new, and in particular, when online gaming came on the scene, that's when cheating as a, let's be honest, as a business started, really. And I think that's an important thing to remember, is that cheating is now a business. It's not just hobbyists trying to make themselves, trying to break the system and actually kind of almost create something almost constructive in a way. This is about businesses selling cheats to players who want to cheat and want to scam other players and indeed the publishers. Um, what we noticed is that it's a game of, I mean, there's so many different, there's quite a few cliches. It's an arms race, it's a game of whack-a-mole, whatever you want to call it. But it's that constant sort of chase it. You've got the publishers on the one hand. It's an arms race. They're constantly, the cheats are developing new cheats, the publishers are catching up, trying to identify them and catching up. And it just goes on and goes on. And obviously, anti-cheat software is incredibly important for protecting the game, anti-tamper, which are all in all its, whether it's anti-tamper or heuristics or whatever, it's all very important. But the one area where we noticed that publishers were kind of trying to win with their hands tied behind their back, I guess, was in the business of intelligence, staying ahead or keeping up to date with what is going on in the cheating communities. And cheat development and the selling of cheats, they're like any community, they congregate online. And so we realized and we thought that, well, by monitoring these communities, we would be able to gather insight and data at a kind of at a much quicker rate than you can do manually, which is what a lot of the publishers were doing. We would do it through a SaaS platform we've developed, which will do it on a much bigger scale, much quicker. And effectively, we can monitor all the cheat developer channels, forums, etc., where they all talk about cheats, where they sell cheats, etc. And we can give that insight and data to publishers through our SaaS platform on an ongoing basis. And with that data, they can continually optimize their anti-cheat software. And by buying cheats, testing them, seeing how they work, and patching the game, as one example. But by doing this, we can get let. The way we can't sometimes talk about it is, if it's a game of whack-a-mole, at least they now know where the mole's coming out of next.
Yeah, that's an awesome point. I remember years ago I was dealing with spam and spam filters, and it was the same type of thing. As you block a spammer, they find another way to
Yeah.
send you spam, and cheaters are just the same way. You put one of the anti-cheats in place, all right, then they're going to find the next anti-cheat. It's not like cheating is going to give up just because you found a way to block them, and you put it great. I never really thought about it, but it is its own business. People are profiting
Yeah.
over this and making money off this. And curious, from your side, do you know any of the numbers of how much cheating is costing some of these developers?
Well, it's hard. It's really hard to put a number on how much it costs the developers and the publishers, because obviously a lot of this data is very confidential. But the ways in which it costs them, talking kind of at an abstract level, include I mean, there's lots of research on this, but you can see that a lot of it's something like 70% of gamers say they've encountered cheating in the last 6 months, or approximately. And then you get the research. That sort of research often asks the question, "What do you do when you encounter cheating?" And a lot of them just say they'll move, they'll leave the game, they'll go into another game. So obviously there's the danger and there's the cost of losing players. But even the ones that don't actually leave the game will often claim that they're less likely to spend money in game on items, because after all, why bother spending money if someone's just going to get you with an aimbot straight away? So it obviously has an impact like that. I mean, but in terms of numbers, the other way of looking at it is what the cheats themselves, what they charge, and most of them, a lot of them are based on they charge out on a kind of subscription model, a monthly subscription model, and that can range from $30 a month to sort of thousands of dollars a month for something that's really exclusive and isn't really being sold on the kind of open market of cheats.
Wow,
It's
I
kind of
had no
crazy.
idea there were SaaS cheating platforms out there, basically allowing you to join these things. Wow, that's
Yeah.
fascinating. It must be really in-depth communities, and I like the social listening aspect of it, right? Because then you have all the tools needed to crawl the networks, crawl the social, right? I mean, people are obviously communicating about this online, so how do you figure out where they live without that? And that just kind of blows my mind that these communities exist. And I guess it's just more being naive and not understanding that they have been there, but the level of depth, like I would question why someone's spending $1,000 a month to cheat, but then I could understand you can sell your account, right? You build a Clash of Clans town, you
Precisely.
level up to level whatever town hall they're on, then you sell that account and you profit from there.
Exactly, and you've got and there's different reasons. That's 100%. If you like account is kind of loosely called account fraud, goes kind of almost hand in hand with cheating on so many levels. I mean, on one level, it enables cheats who do get detected and banned. Within a couple of minutes, they bought another account and can be playing again.
Yeah.
In a matter of hours. So which raises the questions around banning players, how effective that can be. But then obviously, as you said there, there's the aspect of some people cheat purely to boost accounts, which they can then sell, and that is a kind of a circle which goes round and round and round. And that's 100% one of the problems. And then but then there are people who cheat. Dare I say, streamers and some esports players will be buying or using very exclusive cheats, probably the kind that are only available in private forums, if indeed even there. And there'll be, that like in most professional sports, there are some people who are out to abuse the system and win at any cost.
Yeah, and it really has an impact on the community, as you were mentioning earlier, right? Because I, as a player, if I'm going to go play the latest Call of Duty, right, and I get on there and I'm keep getting my butt handed to me by someone that's cheating, right, I'm not going to go back and play the game, and that hurts twofold, right? Because the retention rate is huge for gaming companies, and to your point, I would spend money in Call of Duty, right? I don't mind paying for skins if I'm playing a game that I really love, but if I'm going to keep getting my butt handed to me, there's no reason I'm going to go back into that game.
Yeah, completely. And I think that yeah, there's that aspect. Obviously, actually, and what we've seen, particularly players who are new to a game, that's kind of almost the saddest thing is you'll see, people who aren't sort of haven't played CS:GO for years and are used to it. They'll start playing it, but then within a matter of hours they'll be coming across cheats and just that's it. Hands up, I'm off. Or actually, sadder still, they just think they're not very good and give up. They might
Yeah,
not even realize it's actually a cheat that they're playing. They just think, oh, this game's too hard for me,
yeah,
which is a whole other problem. But then another issue is the toxicity that comes with cheating as well. And I mean, cheat communities themselves are, as you won't be surprised to hear, pretty toxic places. It's almost like a badge of honor. But unfortunately, that also comes into the main player communities as well. Because if you think about it, if you start playing a game, you're doing quite well. You start leveling. You start putting in the hours, spending a bit on in-game items, leveling up your character, getting to a decent level, and then one day you come across someone who's cheating and then is annihilating you with an aimbot every time you respawn. You get pissed off with this, and unfortunately, some people just take it on the chin and go, right, that's enough for me. I'm off. But that other people will, they'll retaliate with some toxic behavior, kind of understandably in some respects, and then obviously what that kind of is, it becomes a vicious circle that cheating begets toxicity, and obviously the issue is toxicity kind of begets cheating as well, because in a toxic community your kind of moral compass, if you like, is going to be less bothered about using a cheat than in a community with respect and integrity running through it.
right.
Playing amongst toxic cheats, you're not really going to care. And then you've also got the aspect of when you at when someone does start, if you do encounter cheating for the first time, you start to not trust everyone you're playing with. So you're throwing accusations around, and then you start throwing accusations around on purpose. I mean, you can kind of see how it quickly degenerates into a pretty nasty scene.
Yeah, you have a very negative sentiment built around your game, which is going to affect everything. And you want to make sure you don't have that negative sentiment because happy players will keep coming back to your game. And
Yeah,
when we spoke a couple weeks ago, you kind of you threw this out that when your game gets popular, your community starts to grow. When your community starts to grow, toxicity can start to come into that, right? Cheating is going to be more apparent on popular games than less popular games because people are there. So it's like this chicken or egg in a way. Like you want to grow that community, but you also want to create that safe place for your community where there aren't cheaters, where there's only good eggs or neutral eggs. I guess we don't need all good people, but like you don't necessarily need all the it's like how do you prevent that toxicity from coming in? And with Intorqa, I assume you guys are mostly doing the proactive, let's make sure that these cheaters are out there. Are you working with communities at all as well, or do you partner with anyone that works with these communities as well and make sure that the
no. Generally speaking, our the clients we work with are in the security teams. Where it does actually vary is occasionally with smaller games where they don't really have an established security team. It seems to sometimes land on the community managers' response. It's one of their many responsibilities, so we'll work with them on that. But it's interesting, the sort of you call it chicken and egg. It goes back to the point that cheat development is a business. And so, a cheat developer is going to make cheats for a game that's popular. They are going to make some money, so they go for the most popular games. And actually, what they often do is they will start early. They will start hitting games as soon as they look like they're becoming popular, even in alpha and beta tests. If something's getting a lot of hype, a lot of anticipation, or even more so, if it's the sequel to something, they will be there. And we've seen cheat developers come out with cheats 2 days after announcing the fact they're working on them. We've seen another game, very famous sequel, or recent sequel, where it was crazy numbers. It was like 75 cheats were available after about 8 days. I mean, ludicrous. Now, some of those won't work. That's one of the things we spend a lot of time doing is sifting through kind of the scams effectively. I mean, it's not a surprise, is it, and cheating, that a lot of those things that people are buying are just scams, often malware, whatever, or just don't work. So a lot of what we do is sifting through them, but still the numbers are crazy, and it's the speed at which they'll target a game which looks like it's becoming popular, which is kind of why thinking about, particularly in certain sorts of games, if it's turn-based strategy games, it's not going to be such an issue. Puzzle games, not such an issue. But if you're launching a battle royale multiplayer shooter, it's it needs to be kind of almost item one on the agenda, because you will be attracting cheats. They will be targeting your game, and you need to be taking steps well before you're going into testing.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. Especially with these live service games, it dies by the numbers, right? It lives or dies by that. So,
Yeah.
right, like you said, if you're not ready for that right out the gate, you have probably this little window where you make things right or wrong. There's some games recently I played that once they came out, I had a bad experience that first
Yeah.
time. Don't even look back. Why? Because there's 10 other games that do the same thing, right? And
Completely.
it's important for their reputation. It's important for that to make sure it's a fair environment, a level environment, someplace where anyone, whether I've ever played a first-person shooter or a battle royale, can thrive or not.
100%. And it's there's nothing sadder than seeing, and we've seen a few of them recently, some, I say recent, in the last 12, 18 months, of new indie games, shooters taking the world by storm, doing fantastically well, but then all of a sudden, before you know it, if you look at the player Reddits, all they're talking about is how many cheaters there are, and that I'm going to move back to whatever game it was, and it's just and that's, and it's kind of, it's not surprising if you're an indie that game security isn't on your kind of number one on your list of priorities in terms of investment and stuff. But unfortunately, it's becoming more and more important. If you're launching one of those sorts of games, it just has to be high up on your agenda. Otherwise, you can just get literally overrun with cheaters.
Usually about halfway through the podcast, I like to do a fireball round. I'll throw some questions at you.
Oh,
Good to
God.
go?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. What did you have for breakfast?
A bagel with Marmite.
Marmite. It's very
That's probably going to
Australian, right?
that might throw many of the any of your US listeners what Marmite is. I'm not quite sure how to explain it. Technically, it's yeast extract.
All right. Well, we'll look that up.
Yeah.
Uh, what game are you playing?
I am playing. It's embarrassing to say it, but I'm still the one I go back to. Shall we say is Mario Kart again
Beautiful,
and
man.
again and
I played
again.
that last night.
Yeah, there you go. You can't beat the classics.
No, of course not.
And you can
It
dip
makes
in and out of it. And when you're when you're busy, and
this. If you're a drinker, there's some great drinking games with Mario Kart as well. You
yeah,
can
I've never
really have a
tried that.
fun adult time. Yep.
Yeah,
Dream vacation.
Australia.
Australia. What is the last book you read?
The one I'm reading at the moment actually, so that's my dog, is relevant to gaming. Blood, Sweat and Pixels, which I know is not
Nice.
new, but it's I came across it. I just saw someone talking about it the other day and read it. It's just great because it's obviously many of the stories are from quite a few, not that long ago, but quite a few years ago, before the kind of the latest boom in gaming.
Okay.
So yeah, that's really good. It's interesting to hear because obviously we're not developers, so we get to see some of the kind of gaming as an industry,
Mhm.
but not from the inside. And I think what's fascinating about that book, particularly in all the stories in it, is it's obviously the inside story in some of really big games like Destiny and Halo, and yeah, it's cool.
Awesome. Cool. Well, you're off the hot seat. Easy, right? Um, I'm really curious about your timing of Intorqa because it seems to me from the outside it's almost perfect in a evil way, right? Where you're 2019, you launched the company, gaming's doing great. Not as great as it will be doing, but gaming's doing great. All of a sudden, Intorqa launches. Not related. A few months later, COVID.
Exactly.
Not related. COVID comes out, and gaming just booms,
Yeah.
right? And all of a sudden, I'm sure then everyone's like, "Oh, lots of new players playing these games. Lots of new cheats coming in." Was it great timing?
That's a good question. It wasn't down to us, by the way. I don't want to say it was a coincidence, but
We'll stress that enough. We can't stress it
it
enough.
was. Well, do you know, it's in some ways it was great timing. I mean, a really kind of mundane point of view. Actually, it was great timing because it stopped us, I think, making a mistake of getting an office. Because it forced us into remote working because there was literally no choice. We kind of got you. We ended up effectively setting up the company as remote, in completely remotely, um, and realized that actually you could do it completely remote, and we're still remote. We don't, we haven't made, and with costs and stuff like that, we didn't make the mistake, or what could have been a mistake, of getting an office, and rent and stuff like that. So from that point of view, it's actually kind of helped keep costs down. It's it's obvious that the increase in gaming as this phenomenon, if you like, was obviously fantastic at the time. But then also, sorry,
You're good.
what we've also what unfortunately we've also sort of seen is the opposite of that, obviously, which is coming off the COVID bubble, if you like, with gaming, and the kind of, I guess, I don't know. Obviously, we can debate where we are in relation to that now. Things are getting better, but it's obviously there's been some tough times. Last year was pretty hard. It was hard getting getting your emails answered, your calls answered, and people had other things on their mind when it came to budget, doing their budgets and things. I think so that obviously in that respect, it was actually the kind of the bubble, for want of a better phrase, didn't help. And I think the last sort of 6 months have been really good because things are definitely across the gaming industry. They feel better. I mean, I was at Gamescom recently with where you were as well, and certainly to me it felt like things were definitely on the up. Gaming had its mojo back. You had a lot more of the publishers and their bigger games had taking bigger stands. So it feels like things are 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 getting better. And I think the good thing is, I think, like all sort of the one positive after you come through tough times in an industry is it will make you do things better. Generally speaking, I think it
Mhm.
will. Hopefully the industry learns lessons. I'm not saying it's all. There's that many lessons to learn, but there are definitely some lessons, and I think it'll make the industry stronger. And I think that can only help us as well.
Yeah, it's funny. From the gaming perspective, I see it being good for you, right? But then you mentioned all these other points, which are so valid, right? Companies weren't even sure what to be doing with their budget at this point, right? They were trying to focus on remote work and how do we get everyone there. It helped you because you realized, hey, we need to do remote work. The not spending on an office is such a great point because most companies, the first thing they would say is, hey, we need to go get an office and be
Yeah,
somewhere, and that would have been a quick ending right there.
completely. I mean, the other
Yeah.
aspect for us when it comes to that actually is the fact that, and I think this will sort of sound naive, but we probably didn't appreciate enough that 90% of our clients are going to be based in the States, and actually in particular on the West Coast. And I'm slightly exaggerating, but so the whole point of having an office, in a way, I mean, I think as a service provider, one of the main reasons you have an office is actually to have meetings and to
Mhm.
have somewhere you can meet clients, etc., etc. that would obviously not have worked for us. So it's, again, it was another sort of learning. And it's so another reason why it's good that we didn't rush into that kind of thing, and realize, oh, actually, remote is the way for us on this.
Yeah.
Remote and conferences.
So, moving on, were you a gamer growing up? And I asked this because, again, I see head of advertising, brand director. So you
Yeah.
clearly had a creative side to you um, growing up and wanted to be in the marketing side of things. I would venture a guess. Were you a gamer, and was there ever a goal to be in gaming one day?
There was well, I don't know which way around to do that, but I remember when I'm trying to think what age I would have been, but probably about 10, getting an Atari, the classic Atari, which came with Combat back then, and became kind of obsessed with games like Pitfall, The Empire Strikes Back, Vanguard, all that kind of Defender. That was my era. That was my entry into gaming, and I was obsessed by it then. I kind of then sort of, I suppose, slightly grew out of it in my late teens, I guess. Came back to it again in my early 20s at university. Lots of rounds of sensible soccer was a big one with me and my friends, which is the sort of precursor to FIFA, I guess, or EAFC now. And then obviously the likes of Grand Theft Auto would have been sort of my gaming in the sort of late 20s, early 30s. But then, to be honest, then parenthood takes over.
Yeah.
And takes up all your time. And actually, my sort of the gaming then takes a big part of your life through your children. And that's actually when I became sort of fascinated with it as an industry. It wasn't just a hobby; it was an industry and a business that I became slightly sort of obsessed with doing something with my kids. Playing. I mean, that was Minecraft, Fortnite, and FIFA. Yeah, that was probably the triumvirate. And then obviously graduating as they're far too young onto the likes of Call of Duty and Grand Theft Auto, as young boys, as teenage boys do, or young teenage boys do. And that's when I became really interested in it as a business, and it actually coincides that's kind of what triggered what I mentioned earlier in the conversation when I was at Barclays, looking at gaming from both a sort of a brand reputation point of view and kind of also a commercial opportunity.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, all the anti-cheat, right, will help those kids jump into these games and not be swayed away,
Yeah,
right? There's,
yeah,
we talked about it earlier. My son is 6, and I love playing games with him, and I don't want him to come into these games where it's all toxic and negative and cheaters, right? And I think it's important for companies
completely.
like you to help protect. Well, it's not on you, but like provide those tools to help protect those
And
kids.
it kind of came from. I mean, genuinely, there's a sort of kind of first-hand experience there with your kids saying, "Oh, is it okay if I click on this?" And you go, "Hang on, let me check that before you click on this." And and then also, the kind of apocryphal story of the kid who kind of buys too much on a game, spends a fortune on a mobile game and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I've kind of been through all of that, and yeah, you're right. That's actually kind of what made me think of it as a business, but then also that you could do something good within that business.
hmm Your role as chief revenue
Yeah.
officer is a little different than what you've had in the past, but I think it all kind of rolls up to it eventually. I like to understand what skill or what skill set do you tap into most at your current role. So if you had to take a look at kind of your day to day, what are you doing most of the day, and what skill is that kind of triggering?
Well, that's a good question. That's a good question because there's in a startup, and we're still pretty small. We're still 20 people or so. You end up doing quite a lot.
Yeah.
You end up you end up doing much more than kind of would normally sit under your job title. I mean, I'm kind of responsible for the I suppose the sort of, if you like, the public face of the business in terms of presenting that business to our to our clients, but also to our prospects. So there's a communication aspect to that. There's a kind of, I guess, a creative aspect to it. Idea generation, but then also a lot of planning when it comes to things like conferences, messaging, looking ahead at what we think can work at what we think will strike a chord with potential prospects at any moment in time. Some of it's kind of like thinking, oh, we should be doing a white paper, looking ahead and thinking about what white paper we should be doing. I kind of lead those for the business. Um, but running the website, it's kind of all. You become in a startup. You do become a bit of a sort of you dabble in almost everything.
Hmm. Yeah,
But
I
I don't
always
do
like
the
to,
technical stuff. That's the bit I don't
not
do.
yet. I always like to say you got to be kind of good at everything, but a master of none,
That
right?
was the phrase I was trying to. I was trying to. I sort of couldn't remember, but it is like that. It is
Yeah,
like that. But it's the nice things. I must admit, it's the being in a startup is it means I can concentrate a lot more than I used to be able to in a big business on doing the things that I like. I mean, the
yeah,
biggest change, you don't have to get something approved by 15 other people and 15 other levels just to go and do it. And it's quite weird that you sort of find yourself amazed at how much you've actually done, but feeling that it's been a lot easier to do it sometimes. And you realize that's because you haven't been waiting outside someone's office to get a signature on a piece of paper or something like that, or, all that kind of all the bureaucratic nonsense.
yes.
So
You
yeah,
remove the layers, right?
completely. I mean, it's a dream. I don't think I could go back to that.
What's the aspect of your job that you dislike the most?
Probably chasing payments. It's
Ooh.
I mean the finance stuff. Do you know what I mean? Kind of, I'm obviously sort of, I'm obviously British, so we're quite kind of reserved. We don't like confrontation, etc., etc. So that kind of, would you mind paying us on time? Can make us feel uncomfortable. No, but seriously, I mean, it's that sort of, it's the sort of, it's that, yeah, the finances, I guess, is probably the way to put that. Although I'm not actually doing that. I'm not contrary to what one of my clients thought, I'm not the financial director.
My wife is a finance person, so whenever we need to call someone and yell at them for something, I just give her the phone and say, "Hey,
Yeah,
that's all you. Go make enemies."
proper finance people are so good at them; they just don't care.
No, right? It's you got to get rid of that feeling, and I don't know how she
Exactly,
does it.
exactly.
If you were going to start your own gaming studio today,
Ooh.
and you needed to start thinking about anti-cheat measures, at what point in the development process do you start thinking, "Hey, we need to be thinking about this. Is it alpha? Is it beta? Is it sooner?"
It comes back to what sort of game you're doing. But if but if it was a kind of a shooter, battle royale, multiplayer, whatever, which, really, excuse the pun, is in the target for, for the cheat industry. I would start. It's before alpha. I mean, it's just doing. It's often just doing the. I mean, often some of the first stuff you can do is just research. Looking at, because there will be, most likely there will be games similar to the one you're developing that are out there. Do you know what I mean? If you're doing a battle royale, look at what's happening with other battle royales, and,
Hmm.
so investigate the cheats around those games. See how they're cheated. See what you're going to be faced with. See which regions those cheats come with. Those cheats are being where they're being developed, where they're being sold, what the reseller market is there. You can do a huge amount to prepare yourself by looking at what the problems of other games, I suppose, is one way of putting it. There are some. I mean, we see there are cheat developers who kind of almost, wouldn't say they focus on games in beta or alpha, but they certainly make sure they're the first to have a cheat out for those games. And so it's about knowing who they are. No, it's being prepared, isn't it? Is a huge step. And then I guess also just in terms of, and this isn't my area of expertise, but in terms of actually developing the game, thinking about, I suppose it's a tricky one, because obviously a lot of what makes a battle royale fun is also what makes cheats target it, and that's the tricky thing in a way. It's kind of, it's very hard to, you're never going to have no cheats, but it's just looking for any opportunities where you can kind of trip them up, or you can kind of maybe reduce the likelihood. Yeah, start early. I mean, it's obviously what we would say, but start early and, yeah, research and, yeah, know the problems before they become problems.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting step. I don't know again why I don't think about it, but like There's tons of battle royale games out there. There's tons of extraction shooters, whatever type of game
Yeah,
you're making, right? Like Google the cheats that are out there, see what's
100%.
existing out there, and you can put in maybe you can't put in preventative measures right away, but you can put in roadblocks to try and
Yeah,
block people or
yeah.
dissuade people from doing that.
And and talk, the other thing would be to talk. We don't, just to be clear, we don't do anti-cheat software. That's not what we do. And so, one of the things would be to talk to other developers, publishers of get those games that are getting kind of cheated, and find out what they're doing. What anti-cheat solutions are they using? Because one thing that I would definitely stress is there's no silver bullet. There's no one solution. You can't just put one anti-cheat solution in. I think job done, because it's not like that. They all do different things. Some are
Right.
better at one sort of thing than another, etc., etc. So it's kind of like I was actually speaking to a prospect the other day, and they described their anti-cheat solution as a sort of Frankenstein's monster, all different parts put together, and they were being kind of funny about it. But actually, there's some truth. It's the really important message out of that is it will require different things for different aspects of the kind of threat community, if you like.
Have you come across any cheats that just boggled your mind? Like, wow, I can't believe they're doing this.
I mean, I I was surprised. I mean, one of the things that's they've been around a while, but it's getting talked about more now are DMA cheats, direct memory access. Um, and the thing that I mean, I don't know if you know, but they basically enable people that you end up with a cheater will end up with two screens, and it basically, putting it really simply, it means that they're playing the game on one screen and cheating on another, and so they're basically cheating, but there's no cheat injected into the gaming PC.
Hmm.
So
I have to
obviously,
look
it
these
makes it
up.
immediately make you can sort of see that's going to be hard to detect, and it is. They are hard to detect, not impossible, but they are hard to detect. And that's kind of one of the sort of, I guess, one of the new things. But the thing but that kind of surprised me, I guess. In a way, I shouldn't be surprised because we already know that cheats can be expensive. But this means people are investing in effectively a second PC and lots of other little gizmos and stuff to make them do this, and they're spending a couple of $1,000. It's getting a lot cheaper now, I should say. But it's quite within the realms of possibility for someone to spend $2,000 just to be able to do that. And you think, really, you
Hey,
know,
man.
and they're doing it to get around some. And ironically, the reason people were doing that is to get around the better anti-cheat solutions that are out there. So it's worth
Fascinating.
it. Apparently, in their minds, it's worth investing because this gets you around whatever. I'm not going to say their names, but gets you around their anti-cheat, which otherwise you can't. And that sort of thing.
Man,
You
I'm
don't
sitting
need to
here.
do this for that anti-cheat. It's kind
I
of
have, a,
it's
I
crazy.
have an old graphic card I'm debating on updating, and here you are telling me people have multiple computers running cheats on them, and then maybe I'm just being cheap over here.
Yeah, there's some. I
That-
mean, if you type it into YouTube, you can see people literally doing an entire DMA setup and showing you how to do it.
s-
Um, and it's dedicated. They're dedicated. Sadly,
have you messed around with any of these cheats to test them out, see how they work?
not me personally, but no, the business we do. We have people who do that all day long.
How
Um,
many machines have been destroyed from viruses or anything like that?
we're very careful, shall we say? We're
Yeah.
very careful, but in doing our testing, we do get banned a fair bit. But fortunately, as we're often doing it, we'll be doing it for clients.
If you're doing it for a
We get
client
unbanned.
today, like when you could do say, "Hey, we got banned. Can you unban us?" Like, is it cool like that?
Well, it is when you're doing it for them.
Yeah,
Obviously,
yeah, yeah.
you have to have we have to have agreed already. But yeah, no, I mean that's kind of we do a lot of cheat testing and stuff and plan. Yeah, so that there are people in the team who spend a lot of time cheating, and actually got a lot of time finding cheats that just simply don't work. You know, right? And it's you'd be surprised at how much. Again, it shows the length to which people go. Is that it's not a case of it's not like just downloading an app. These things there's quite a process to go through, and it very often the instructions are wrong or it doesn't load the first time, etc., etc., etc. But again, these particularly the resellers for cheats are incredibly professional now. They'll have customer care departments. The department's probably one person, but they have a customer care team. I saw the other day, and I'll be dining out on this for a while, but an ad. I guess it was on disc. I think it was on Discord from a cheap reseller with a job ad for a media manager,
Wow.
which I just thought was great. I mean, the resellers are effectively the marketing advertising arm, if you like, of the cheat industry, but still to be hiring a media manager, I thought, wow. I
Things are
imagine
going
there's
well
quite
in
a few
cheat world.
game studios who don't have a media manager.
Right. That is insane. Any interesting KPIs you can share? I mean, you mentioned earlier you can see which countries they're coming from. What are the highest kind of bad actors around?
Um, I mean, it's global is the one thing. I think there's
Yeah.
often a bit of a kind of a stereotype that cheating really is a much bigger deal in APAC region, and that's where all the cheats are being developed. It's kind of, I mean, it is a problem there, but it's a problem in the West as well. I'd say the bulk of the cheat devs we're following at the moment are probably US, European, maybe Russian. You know, it's pretty spread. It's kind of pretty evenly spread now. Any interesting KPIs? I mean, for me, it's always that one about it's the one I mentioned earlier about how during a beta test you can have 75 cheats available on a game
Yeah.
within a matter of days. I think that's pretty incredible.
People are quick, man. Like you said, business is booming. We got to start filming videos on these cheats and make sure we get them on TikTok.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the but that the sort of the marketing arm of it is it's impressive. They have very impressive social forums. They do a lot of YouTube advertising. They do increasing amount. You mentioned it, an increasing amount on TikTok. Um, it's big.
It's
It's big.
crazy. Andrew, this has been an eye-opening and amazing conversation. I got to learn that there's a whole nother vertical out there of just cheating and people building out content creators and things like that in that. And it's fascinating. And I love what Intorqa is doing. I love how you're taking a social listening as approach to it because there must be conversation going on. And this is just all very informative to me. So thank you so much for coming out today. Before we do wrap today, is there anything you would like to just talk about or share?
All I want to say is just is a well done to everyone and a thank you to everyone who like us spends their time trying to keep gaming fair and safe. If you want to find anything else, if you want to find more about Intorqa, please look at our website or at intorqa.com, or you can also find us on LinkedIn as well. Thank you.
And yeah, thank you. And we will have links to Intorqa.com, to their LinkedIn, to all their information that they're doing. They really are doing great stuff and they're working with games that you do know and you do play and they are keeping it safe. So this has been really informative. Like I said, Andrew, thank you so much for coming out today. We will see you at the next community clubhouse as well at GDC. And thank you for all that you do.
Thank you very much, Greg. Cheers.
Cheers.